The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the weathered building marked Truckee General Store, and Clara Owens pressed her trembling fingers against the dusty window, wondering if she had made the worst mistake of her life. It was September 1876, and the mountain town of Truckee, California, sat nestled in the Sierra Nevada, its wooden buildings scattered along the railroad tracks like forgotten toys. Clara had traveled nearly 2,000 miles from Philadelphia, leaving behind a life that had beaten her down so thoroughly she could barely remember what hope felt like. Her late husband had been a cruel man, his fists as ready as his harsh words, and when fever took him 6 months ago, Clara discovered he had left her with nothing but debts and a landlord threatening to sell her into servitude to recoup his losses. The advertisement for a mail-order bride had seemed like divine intervention, though she knew better than to believe in such things anymore. The stagecoach driver opened the door and offered his hand. Clara took it, stepping down onto the dusty street with legs that barely held her weight after 3 weeks of travel. She was 24 years old and felt ancient. Her brown traveling dress was worn thin at the elbows, and her dark blonde hair had come loose from its pins during the rough mountain passage. She carried everything she owned in a single carpet bag that had belonged to her mother. "You the mail-order bride?" a woman's voice asked. Clara turned to see a stout woman in her 50s with iron-gray hair and suspicious eyes. "I am Mrs. Hendricks. I run the boarding house. Your intended paid for you to stay there until the wedding tomorrow." "Thank you," Clara said quietly, keeping her eyes down, as she had learned to do. Making eye contact had always earned her trouble. "Mrs. Hendricks sniffed. "Well, come along then. The stage does not wait, and I have supper to prepare." Clara followed the older woman down the dirt street, taking in her new home with a sense of growing dread. Truckee was rough and raw, the kind of place where survival came before comfort. Men in dusty work clothes paused to stare at her as she passed. She pulled her shawl tighter, though the September afternoon was still warm. The boarding house was a 2-story structure that leaned slightly to the left, as if tired of standing upright. Mrs. Hendricks led her to a small room on the 2nd floor with a narrow bed and a washstand. "Supper is at 6 sharp. Do not be late," Mrs. Hendricks said, then paused in the doorway. "Your intended Mr. Walsh. He is a wealthy man by these parts, owns a saloon, and has business interests in Sacramento. You are lucky to have caught his eye." "Lucky?" Clara nearly laughed at the word. She had written to Mr. Walsh with complete honesty about her circumstances, desperate enough to bare her soul to a stranger. He had responded with promises of security and respect, words that sounded too good to be true. In her experience, when something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. She sat on the bed after Mrs. Hendricks left, her hands folded in her lap, and tried not to think about what tomorrow would bring. She would marry a man she had never met, bind herself to him legally and spiritually, and pray he was kinder than the last man who had owned her. That was what marriage felt like to Clara, ownership, and she had no reason to believe this time would be different. A knock on the door made her jump. "Yes?" "It is Mrs. Hendricks. Mr. Walsh is downstairs. He wants to meet you before tomorrow." Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. She smoothed her dress, tucked her hair behind her ears, and followed Mrs. Hendricks down the narrow stairs with the grim determination of a prisoner walking to the gallows. Mr. Walsh stood in the boarding house parlor, a tall man in an expensive suit with slicked-back dark hair and cold blue eyes. He was perhaps 45, with a thin mouth and an air of impatience that made Clara's stomach tighten with familiar fear. "Miss Owens," he said, looking her up and down like a man appraising livestock. "You are more comely than your photograph suggested. That is good." "Thank you, sir," Clara whispered, keeping her eyes on the worn carpet. "Look at me when I speak to you," he said sharply. Clara forced herself to lift her gaze. Mr. Walsh's eyes were calculating, devoid of warmth. He stepped closer, and she smelled whiskey on his breath, despite the early hour. "You understand what will be expected of you as my wife," he said. It was not a question. "You will manage my household, entertain my business associates, and provide me with an heir. In exchange, you will want for nothing material." "I understand," Clara said, though her throat felt tight. "Good. The ceremony will take place at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning at the church. Do not be late." He turned to leave, then paused. "And Miss Owens, do not make me regret bringing you here. I do not tolerate disobedience." The threat in his words was unmistakable. Clara felt the walls closing in around her, the trap springing shut. This was a mistake, she realized with horrible clarity. Mr. Walsh was cut from the same cloth as her late husband, perhaps worse. But what choice did she have? She had no money for passage back east, no home to return to, no family to take her in. She was trapped as surely as if she wore shackles. After Mr. Walsh left, Clara returned to her room and sat by the window, watching the sun set behind the mountains. She did not cry. She had learned years ago that tears changed nothing. She was still sitting there when another knock came at her door, this time accompanied by Mrs. Hendrick's voice. "Miss Owens, supper." The dining room held 6 other boarders, all men who worked either for the railroad or in the nearby lumber mills. They ate in relative silence, shoveling food with the efficiency of men who worked hard for their living. Clara picked at her plate, her appetite gone. She was about to excuse herself when the front door opened and a man entered, removing his dusty hat as he did. Clara glanced up and found herself caught by a pair of warm hazel eyes in a sun-bronzed face. "Sorry I'm late, Mrs. Hendricks," the man said, his voice a low rumble that somehow felt gentle. "Had trouble with a horse throwing a shoe." "You are always late, Benjamin," Mrs. Hendricks said, but there was affection in her scolding. "Sit down before your food gets cold." Benjamin Ashford took the empty chair across from Clara, and she found herself studying him, despite her usual caution. He was perhaps 28 or 30, with dark brown hair that needed cutting and a lean, muscular build that spoke of hard work. His face was honest and open, with laugh lines around his eyes and a mouth that looked more accustomed to smiling than frowning. He wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy, his shirt dusty from the trail. "You must be the lady arriving today," Benjamin said, offering her a genuine smile. "Welcome to Truckee, miss." "Owens," Clara said softly. "Clara Owens." "It is a pleasure to meet you, Miss Owens. I hope our little town treats you kindly." There was something in the way he said it, a sincerity that made Clara's chest ache. When was the last time someone had spoken to her with simple kindness, expecting nothing in return? "Are you passing through?" Benjamin asked, serving himself from the platters on the table. "I am here to marry," Clara said, the words tasting like ash. "Well, that is wonderful," Benjamin said warmly. "Who is the lucky man?" "Mr. Walsh." The change in Benjamin's expression was subtle but unmistakable. The warmth dimmed, replaced by something that looked like concern. Around the table, the other men had gone quiet. "I see," Benjamin said carefully. "That is quite a match." Clara understood what he was not saying. She looked down at her plate, her hands clenched in her lap beneath the table. Mrs. Hendricks broke the uncomfortable silence. "Mr. Ashford here runs a ranch just outside town, raises some of the finest horses in the Sierra Nevada." "It is a modest operation," Benjamin said, his eyes still on Clara. "But the horses are good animals, and the work is honest." Honest work, honest eyes. Clara felt something crack inside her chest, some wall she had built to protect herself. She excused herself abruptly, unable to bear another moment of Benjamin Ashford's kindness when tomorrow she would bind herself to a man like Mr. Walsh. She barely slept that night, listening to the sounds of the mountain town settling into darkness. Somewhere a dog barked. Trains rumbled through, heading west toward California's cities or east toward Nevada's silver mines. Clara lay in the narrow bed and wondered if she had the courage to run, to disappear into the night and take her chances on the road. But she had no money, no provisions, and winter would come to these mountains soon. Running would be suicide. At dawn, she rose and dressed in her only good dress, a simple gray wool that had been her wedding dress the first time she married. She pinned her hair carefully, noting how thin her face had become, how old her eyes looked. 24 going on 100. "Mrs. Hendricks knocked at 9:30. Time to go to the church. The church was a small white building at the edge of town, its steeple pointing toward a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Mr. Walsh waited inside with the minister, a nervous-looking young man who could not have been more than 25. There were no other guests. Clara understood that this was a business transaction, not a celebration. "You are late," Mr. Walsh said, though the clock on the wall showed 5 minutes before 10. "I apologize," Clara said automatically. The minister opened his Bible. "Shall we begin?" They were halfway through the ceremony, Clara repeating words that felt like nails in her coffin, when the church door opened. Benjamin Ashford stepped inside, hat in hand, looking apologetic. "Forgive me," he said. "I hope I'm not intruding. I thought Miss Owens might want at least one friendly face in attendance." Mr. Walsh's expression darkened. "This is a private ceremony. The church is open to all," the minister said quietly, showing an unexpected backbone. Benjamin took a seat in the back pew. Clara felt his presence like sunlight on her back, warming something that had been frozen for so long. She continued with the ceremony, but when it came time to say "I do," she hesitated. In that moment of hesitation, she looked at Mr. Walsh and saw her future stretched out before her. Years of walking on eggshells, of calculated cruelty and slow suffocation. She would survive, as she had survived before, but she would never truly live. "Miss Owens?" the minister prompted. Clara opened her mouth, and something broke free inside her. "No." The single word dropped into the silence like a stone into still water. "What did you say?" Mr. Walsh's voice was dangerously quiet. "I said no." Clara's voice was stronger now. "I cannot marry you, Mr. Walsh. I am sorry. I will repay you for my travel expenses somehow, but I cannot do this." Mr. Walsh's face turned a dangerous shade of red. "You ungrateful little whore. I paid good money to bring you here, and you will honor our agreement." "An agreement requires consent," the minister said, his voice shaking but firm. "The lady has withdrawn hers." "Stay out of this," Mr. Walsh snarled. He grabbed Clara's arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "You will marry me, or I will see you arrested for fraud." "Let her go." Benjamin's voice cut through the church, calm but implacable. He had risen from the pew and now stood in the aisle, his posture relaxed but ready. "This is none of your business, Ashford," Mr. Walsh said. "When a man puts his hands on a woman in anger, it becomes everyone's business," Benjamin said. "Let her go, Walsh." For a tense moment, Clara thought Mr. Walsh would refuse. His grip on her arm tightened painfully. Then Benjamin took a step forward, and something in his expression made Mr. Walsh release her. "You are making a very big mistake," Mr. Walsh said to Clara. "Both of you. I have friends in this town, and I will see you both suffer for this humiliation." He stormed out of the church, slamming the door behind him. Clara stood frozen, hardly able to believe what she had done. Her arm throbbed where Mr. Walsh had grabbed her, and her heart raced with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. "Miss Owens," Benjamin said gently, approaching her slowly, as if she were a spooked horse. "Are you all right?" Clara looked at this stranger, who had stood up for her when he had no reason to, and suddenly her legs would not hold her anymore. She swayed, and Benjamin caught her, his arm steady and careful. "I have nowhere to go," Clara whispered. "I have no money, nothing. What have I done?" "You chose yourself," Benjamin said simply. "That took more courage than most people have." He looked at the minister. "Thank you, Reverend Miller, for standing firm." The young minister nodded, looking shaken. "I could not in good conscience bind someone in marriage against their will. But Miss Owens, Mr. Walsh was not wrong about his influence. He will make trouble." "Let him try," Benjamin said. He looked down at Clara, who was still leaning against him, drawing strength from his steadiness. "Miss Owens, I know we just met, but I have a proposition for you. I need help at my ranch. My housekeeper left last month to care for her ailing sister, and the place has been falling apart without her. I can offer you room and board and a small wage in exchange for cooking and light housekeeping. It would give you time to figure out what you want to do next." Clara pulled back to look at him, searching his face for the trap, the angle, the cruelty hiding behind the kind offer. But she found only honest concern. "Why would you help me?" she asked. "You do not even know me." "Maybe that is exactly why," Benjamin said. "Because it is the right thing to do, and because—" He paused, seeming to struggle for words. "Because I saw your face when you said you were marrying Walsh, and it looked like you were heading to your own execution. Nobody should have to feel that way." "Mr. Walsh will cause trouble for you," Clara said. "Walsh has been looking for excuses to cause me trouble for years," Benjamin said with a slight smile. "We have never seen eye to eye on certain matters. This just gives him a better reason." Clara knew she should refuse, should not put this good man in danger on her account. But the alternative was returning to the boarding house with nowhere to go and no prospects, waiting for Mr. Walsh to make good on his threats or for the law to come for her. At least at Benjamin's ranch she would be useful. She could work for her keep, and maybe, just maybe, she could figure out a way forward. "I accept," she said. "Thank you, Mr. Ashford." "Benjamin," he said, "if we are going to be living under the same roof, we should be on a first-name basis, and you should know that my ranch is very remote. It is just me and my ranch hand, Tom, who is 65 and as harmless as they come. I will give you my word, right here in front of Reverend Miller, that you will be safe in my home. You will have your own room with a lock on the door, and I will treat you with nothing but respect." He said it so matter-of-factly, as if such things should be assumed, that Clara felt tears prick her eyes. In her world, safety was never assumed. It was fought for, bargained for, and usually lost. "I believe you," she said, and realized she meant it. Benjamin collected Clara's carpet bag from the boarding house, ignoring Mrs. Hendrick's disapproving sniffs and pointed comments about young women who did not know their own minds. Then he helped Clara into a wagon hitched to 2 sturdy draft horses. As they left Truckee behind, following a rough trail into the mountains, Clara felt her shoulders begin to relax for the first time in months. The September day was beautiful, the air crisp and clean, scented with pine and wild herbs. Aspens growing along the creek beds were beginning to turn gold, and the sky stretched overhead in endless blue. "The ranch is about an hour from town," Benjamin said, handling the reins with easy competence. "It is not fancy, but it is solid. My father built the main house 20 years ago when he first came to California. He was a rancher down in the valley until the drought of 1870 drove him up into the mountains. He passed 3 years ago, left the place to me." "I am sorry about your father," Clara said. "Thank you. He was a good man. Taught me that how you treat people matters more than how much money you make." Benjamin glanced at her. "He also taught me about horses. We breed working horses mostly. Tough animals that can handle mountain trails and hard winters. I sell to ranchers, freight companies, and occasionally to the army." Clara listened as Benjamin talked about his work, his voice full of quiet pride. It was clear he loved what he did, loved the land and the animals and the life he had built. It made something ache in Clara's chest, this glimpse of a world where work was not just survival, but satisfaction. "What about you?" Benjamin asked. "What did you do before you came west?" Clara hesitated. She was not used to talking about herself, but something about Benjamin's open, non-judgmental manner made her want to try. "I was married before," she said quietly. "My husband died 6 months ago. He left me with debts I could not pay. The landlord was threatening to sell my contract to a factory owner to recoup his losses. I saw Mr. Walsh's advertisement, and it seemed like the only way out." "Your husband, was he good to you?" The question was asked gently, but Clara knew Benjamin had already guessed the answer. She looked down at her hands, at the faded bruise on her wrist from where Mr. Walsh had grabbed her that morning. "No," she said simply. "He was not." Benjamin was quiet for a moment. "I am glad you are out of that situation, and I am glad you had the courage to walk away from Walsh. That took more strength than most people have." "It felt like cowardice," Clara admitted. "Running away." "It is not running away to refuse to put yourself back in harm's way," Benjamin said firmly. "That is self-preservation, and there is no shame in it." His words settled over Clara like a warm blanket. She had spent so long blaming herself for her circumstances, for not being strong enough or smart enough or good enough to make her marriage work, that hearing someone absolve her of that guilt felt revolutionary. The ranch appeared as they rounded a bend in the trail. It sat in a high meadow, surrounded by pine-covered slopes, with a creek running along one side. The main house was a solid log structure, with a covered porch and stone chimney. Several outbuildings dotted the property: a barn, a stable, a smokehouse, and what looked like a bunkhouse. Horses grazed in a large corral, their coats glossy in the afternoon sun. "It is beautiful," Clara breathed. Benjamin smiled, pleased. "I am glad you think so. Come on. Let me show you inside." The interior of the house was simple but well built, with a main room that served as kitchen and living area, 2 bedrooms, and a small loft. Everything was clean but obviously neglected, with dust on the surfaces and dishes piled in the wash basin. "I am not much for housekeeping," Benjamin said sheepishly. "I can manage the basics, but it is not my strong suit. Your room is through here." He showed her to the smaller of the 2 bedrooms, a cozy space with a real bed, a dresser, and a window looking out toward the mountains. True to his word, there was a sturdy lock on the door, "I will let you get settled," Benjamin said. "Take your time. When you are ready, come out and I will show you around the rest of the place." After he left, Clara sat on the bed and looked around the room that was, for now at least, hers. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. It was quiet except for the distant sounds of horses and the whisper of wind through the pines. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Clara felt safe. Over the next days, Clara settled into a routine at the ranch. She rose with the sun and prepared breakfast for Benjamin and Tom, the elderly ranch hand who lived in the bunkhouse. Tom was a weathered man, with kind eyes and a gentle manner, who treated Clara with grandfatherly courtesy. After breakfast, while the men worked with the horses, Clara cleaned the house, did laundry, and prepared meals. It was hard work, but it was different from the fearful drudgery of her previous life. Here, when she cooked a meal, Benjamin and Tom thanked her genuinely. When she mended Benjamin's torn shirt, he noticed and appreciated it. When she scrubbed the floors, or organized the pantry, or hung fresh curtains in the windows, the men commented on how much nicer the house looked. These small acknowledgments of her labor were like water to parched ground. Clara had forgotten what it felt like to be appreciated, to have her efforts noticed and valued. In her marriage, nothing had ever been good enough. The meals were too cold or too hot, the house too messy or too obviously just cleaned in desperate anticipation of criticism. She had lived in a constant state of anxiety, waiting for the next blow, physical or verbal. Benjamin seemed to sense her skittishness. He moved carefully around her, never raising his voice, always asking rather than demanding. When he came in from work, he removed his boots on the porch without being asked. He complimented her cooking. He noticed when she put wildflowers in a jar on the table and told her they brightened the whole room. These small kindnesses undid Clara in ways she had not expected. One evening, nearly a week after her arrival, Benjamin came in to find her crying over a pot of stew. "Clara, what is wrong?" he asked, concern immediate in his voice. "Did something happen? Are you hurt?" Clara shook her head, wiping at her eyes with her apron. "No, I am fine. I am sorry. This is foolish." "It is not foolish if it made you cry," Benjamin said gently. He maintained a respectful distance, but his whole attention was focused on her. "Tell me what is wrong, please." "You thanked me," Clara said, feeling ridiculous even as she said it, "for making supper. You thank me every day, and you tell me when you like something, and you never complain even when things are not perfect. And I had forgotten what that felt like, to be treated like a person instead of a servant or a possession." She saw something shift in Benjamin's expression, a flash of anger that was not directed at her. "Clara," he said quietly, "I want you to know something. The way your husband treated you, the way Walsh was going to treat you, that is not normal. That is not how it is supposed to be. Every person deserves to be treated with basic human kindness and respect. You are not asking for too much when you expect that. You are asking for the bare minimum, and I am sorry that life has taught you to expect less." His words broke something open in Clara's chest. She turned away, overwhelmed, and felt the tears come harder. A moment later, she felt Benjamin's hand on her shoulder, tentative and gentle. "May I hug you?" he asked. "You look like you could use a hug." No one had asked her permission for anything in so long that Clara was stunned by the question. She nodded, and Benjamin drew her into his arms, holding her carefully while she cried against his shoulder. He smelled like horses and hay and clean sweat, and his arms were strong but gentle, offering comfort without demand. When Clara finally pulled back, embarrassed by her outburst, Benjamin just smiled at her. "Feel better?" he asked. "A little," Clara admitted. "I am sorry. I got your shirt wet." "Shirt's dry," Benjamin said easily. "Now, let us eat this excellent stew you made before it gets cold." After that evening, something shifted between them. Clara felt herself relaxing around Benjamin, letting down the walls she had built to protect herself. She began to talk more at meals, sharing observations about the ranch, or asking Benjamin questions about his work. He answered readily, treating her thoughts and opinions as valuable. Benjamin had a quiet sense of humor that Clara had not expected. He told stories about the horses, assigning them personalities and quirks that made her laugh. He teased Tom gently about his tendency to fall asleep after supper. He sang off-key while he worked, mangling the words to popular songs in ways that made Clara smile despite herself. Clara found herself watching Benjamin when he did not know she was looking. She noticed how he treated the horses with patient kindness, never losing his temper, even when a young stallion tried to bite him. She noticed how he helped Tom with the heavier work without making the older man feel inadequate. She noticed how he always washed up before coming inside, respecting her clean house without her having to ask. One morning, Clara was hanging laundry when a rider approached. She recognized him as one of the men who had been at the boarding house the night she arrived, one of Mr. Walsh's associates. She felt her stomach tighten with familiar fear. Benjamin emerged from the barn, his posture alert. "Can I help you?" "Mr. Walsh sent me," the man said. "He wants to know if you are harboring Miss Owens." "Miss Owens is employed here as my housekeeper," Benjamin said calmly. "What business is it of Walsh's? She owes him for her travel expenses. He wants payment, or he wants her back to honor their agreement." "There was no agreement," Benjamin said. "The marriage did not take place because Miss Owens withdrew her consent. As for travel expenses, how much is Walsh claiming?" The man named a sum that made Clara gasp. It was far more than reasonable travel from the east would cost. "That is robbery," Benjamin said flatly. "Tell Walsh if he wants to negotiate a reasonable reimbursement, he can come talk to me directly. But Miss Owens is not going anywhere." The man's eyes hardened. "Mr. Walsh does not negotiate, and he does not take kindly to people who cross him." "Then I guess Walsh and I will have a problem," Benjamin said. His voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath. "Now, if that is all, I have work to do." After the man left, Clara found she was shaking. "Benjamin, I am so sorry. I should not have involved you in this." "You did not involve me," Benjamin said firmly. "I chose to help you, and Walsh is a bully who is used to getting his way. Someone needs to stand up to him. He could hurt you," Clara said, "or hurt your business." "Let me worry about that," Benjamin said. He looked at her closely. "Are you all right?" Clara nodded, but she was not all right. The encounter had reminded her that she was living on borrowed time, that her safety was not really her own, but depended on Benjamin's protection. It was a better situation than most she had found herself in, but it was still fundamentally precarious. That night, she lay in her bed and thought about leaving. She could slip away before dawn, follow the road west to Sacramento or San Francisco, lose herself in a city where Walsh could not find her. But she had no money for such a journey, and winter was coming to the mountains. And, if she was honest with herself, she did not want to leave. In just over a week, this ranch had become more of a home than anywhere she had lived in years. Benjamin and Tom had become the closest things to family she had. The work was satisfying, the mountain air was healing, and for the first time in her adult life, Clara felt like she was living rather than just surviving. But she also knew she was becoming dangerously attached to Benjamin Ashford. She caught herself listening for his footsteps, smiling when he walked into a room, treasuring the moments when their hands accidentally brushed as they passed dishes at the table. She memorized the way he looked when he was working with the horses, the concentration on his face softening into satisfaction when an animal responded to his training. She noticed everything about him, and that noticing felt like waking up after a long, dark sleep. It was dangerous to care. Caring led to vulnerability, and vulnerability led to pain. Clara had learned that lesson thoroughly, but her heart seemed determined not to listen to her head. The next day was Sunday, and Benjamin asked if she would like to ride into town for church services. "I am not sure that is a good idea," Clara said. "Mr. Walsh will be there." "All the more reason for you to go," Benjamin said. "If you hide away here, people will believe Walsh's version of events. But if you hold your head high and show them you have nothing to be ashamed of, you take away his power." Clara was not sure she believed that, but she agreed to go. She wore her gray dress and pinned her hair carefully, trying to look respectable. Benjamin hitched up the wagon, and they rode into Truckee together, Tom choosing to stay behind to mind the ranch. The church was fuller than it had been for the aborted wedding. Heads turned as Clara and Benjamin entered, and she heard the whisper of voices. Benjamin seemed unaffected by the attention. He guided her to a pew near the middle and sat beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. Mr. Walsh sat near the front with several of his associates. He did not turn around, but Clara could feel his anger like a physical force. Reverend Miller preached about compassion and standing up for those who could not stand up for themselves. Clara wondered if he had chosen the topic deliberately. After the service, several townspeople approached them. Some were merely curious, but others were genuinely kind. "Miss Owens," said a woman in her 30s with a warm smile, "I am Martha Cooper. I heard about what happened with Mr. Walsh. I want you to know I think you were very brave." "Thank you," Clara said, surprised. "Walsh is not a good man," Martha said quietly. "There are women in this town who could tell you stories. You did the right thing refusing him." Other women approached with similar sentiments. Clara realized with dawning wonder that she was not alone. These women understood, in ways that men perhaps could not, what it meant to be trapped with no good choices. They did not judge her for almost marrying Walsh or for refusing him. They simply understood. As they were leaving, Mr. Walsh intercepted them on the church steps. "Ashford," he said coldly. "Miss Owens." "Walsh," Benjamin replied evenly. "I hope you are enjoying your little rebellion," Walsh said to Clara. "But you should know that it will cost you. I will see you destitute and ruined." "If you continue threatening Miss Owens, we will have a problem," Benjamin said. Walsh turned his cold gaze on Benjamin. "You always were a fool, Ashford, too soft-hearted for your own good. It is going to get you hurt one of these days." "Maybe," Benjamin said, "but I would rather be a fool with a heart than the alternative." Walsh's face darkened, but before he could respond, Reverend Miller stepped forward. "Gentlemen, please, this is a house of worship. If you have disagreements, settle them elsewhere." Walsh stalked away, his associates following. Clara released a breath she had not known she was holding. On the ride back to the ranch, Clara was quiet, processing everything that had happened. "Thank you," she said finally, "for standing by me." "You do not have to thank me for that," Benjamin said. "It is just basic decency." "It is more than that," Clara insisted. "You have put yourself at risk for me. You have stood up to a powerful man on my behalf. You have given me work and shelter and treated me with kindness every single day. That is not basic decency, Benjamin. That is extraordinary." Benjamin was quiet for a moment. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. "Of course. When I saw you at the boarding house that first night, you looked so sad, so defeated. And when you said you were marrying Walsh, I wanted to say something, but it was not my place. I went to that wedding thinking I would just be a witness. But when you hesitated, when you said no, I was so proud of you. You were the bravest person in that room." His words made Clara's throat tight. "I did not feel brave. I felt terrified." "That is what makes it brave," Benjamin said. "Doing the right thing even when you're scared." They arrived back at the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple. Clara went inside to prepare supper, while Benjamin tended to the horses. As she worked, she found herself humming, a habit from her childhood that she had lost somewhere along the way. She was beginning to heal. She could feel it happening, like a broken bone knitting back together. The constant tension that had defined her life for years was slowly unwinding. She slept through the nights now, without nightmares. She smiled more readily. She allowed herself small pleasures like the wildflowers she picked for the table, or the extra cinnamon she added to the apple pie. And at the center of this healing was Benjamin, reminding her every day through his words and actions what kindness felt like. October arrived, bringing cooler temperatures, and aspen groves turned to gold. Clara had been at the ranch for nearly a month, and life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. She managed the household while Benjamin and Tom worked with the horses. In the evenings, the three of them would sit on the porch and watch the stars come out, talking about everything and nothing. Clara learned more about Benjamin during these conversations. She learned that he had traveled to San Francisco once and hated the crowds and noise. She learned that his mother had died when he was young, and his father had raised him alone. She learned that he loved to read, but had very few books, having lost most of his father's collection in a fire years ago. She learned that he dreamed of expanding the ranch, breeding horses that would be known throughout California for their quality and temperament. In turn, Clara found herself sharing pieces of her own story. She told Benjamin about growing up in Philadelphia, about her mother, who had been a seamstress, and her father, who had worked on the docks. She told him about her first marriage, not in detail, but enough that he understood what she had endured. She told him about the dreams she had had as a girl, of a life full of love and laughter and safety, dreams that had been beaten out of her over the years. "You can have those things again," Benjamin said one evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "You deserve them." "I am not sure I know how to dream anymore," Clara admitted. "Then start small," Benjamin suggested. "What is one thing right now that would make you happy?" Clara thought about it. "More books," she said finally. "I miss reading. My husband did not approve of it. He said it gave women ideas. Benjamin smiled. Well, we cannot have that, can we? Women with ideas. How terrifying. His tone was gently mocking. Next time I go to town, I will stop by the general store. They usually have a few books. You do not have to do that, Clara protested. I know I do not have to, Benjamin said. I want to. 3 days later, he returned from town with a stack of 5 books, 3 novels, a book of poetry, and a collection of essays. Clara clutched them to her chest like treasures, which is what they were to her. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much. I hope you like them, Benjamin said. The storekeeper recommended the novels, said they were popular with the ladies. That night, Clara stayed up late reading by lamplight, losing herself in stories of adventure and romance. It was such a simple pleasure, but it felt like reclaiming a piece of herself that had been lost. As October progressed, Clara noticed Benjamin watching her more often. His gaze would linger when he thought she was not looking, and sometimes when their eyes met across the room, there was something in his expression that made her heart beat faster. She told herself she was imagining it, that a man like Benjamin would not be interested in damaged goods like her, but she could not quite make herself believe it. One afternoon, Clara was in the garden behind the house, harvesting the last of the vegetables before the first hard freeze. Benjamin came around the corner of the house and stopped short, watching her. Sorry, he said. I did not mean to startle you. You did not, Clara said, straightening with a basket of carrots and potatoes. I was just finishing up. Benjamin took the heavy basket from her. You have done wonders with this garden. My father planted it years ago, but I let it go to weeds after he died. I am glad to see it productive again. I like the work, Clara said. It feels good to make things grow. They walked back to the house together, and at the door, Benjamin paused. Clara, I wanted to ask you something. Next week is the harvest dance in town. It is an annual tradition, and most everyone goes. Would you consider attending with me? Clara's heart stuttered. As your housekeeper? No, Benjamin said carefully. As my guest, as someone I enjoy spending time with and would like to spend more time with, if you are amenable. Clara stared at him, hardly able to believe what she was hearing. Benjamin, you know what people would say. You know my history. I know you were married to a cruel man who died and left you in terrible circumstances. I know you made the brave choice to walk away from another cruel man rather than trap yourself in a similar situation. I know you are one of the strongest, kindest, most resilient people I have ever met. That is your history, Clara, and I see nothing in it to be ashamed of. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. I am not whole, she whispered. I am broken. Benjamin, damaged. Benjamin set down the basket and took both of her hands in his touch warm and gentle. You are not broken, he said firmly. You are a person who has been through hell and survived. That does not make you damaged. That makes you a survivor. And Clara, I have been falling in love with you since the moment you said no in that church. I have been trying to give you space and time because I know you needed both. But I do not want to hide how I feel anymore. I care about you, deeply, and if you will give me the chance, I would like to see where this could go between us. Clara could barely breathe. No one had ever spoken to her like this, with such raw honesty and tenderness. Every instinct told her to protect herself, to pull away before she got hurt. But a small, brave voice inside her whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was real. Maybe Benjamin meant every word. Maybe she could have the life she had stopped daring to dream about. I care about you too, she admitted, her voice shaking. I have been trying not to, because I was afraid. I am still afraid. That is all right, Benjamin said gently. We can be afraid together. We can take this as slowly as you need. But Clara, please say you will come to the dance with me. Let me court you properly. Let me show you what it is like to be cherished. Cherished. The word wrapped around Clara's heart and squeezed. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will go to the dance with you. Benjamin's face lit up with such joy that Clara felt her own spirits lift in response. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently, a gesture so old-fashioned and sweet that it made her want to cry. Thank you, he said. You have made me very happy. Over the next week, Clara found herself alternating between excitement and terror about the dance. She had one decent dress, the gray wool, but it was not exactly festive, Martha Cooper, who had spoken to her so kindly at church, visited the ranch one afternoon with a solution. "I heard you might be attending the harvest dance," Martha said, her eyes twinkling, "and I thought you might need something more suitable to wear. This was my wedding dress, but I have put on too much weight to wear it again. I thought it might fit you, with some alterations." The dress she showed Clara was beautiful, a deep blue calico with tiny white flowers. Clara tried it on in her room, and with some quick adjustments, it fit perfectly. "It is too much," Clara protested when she showed Martha. "Nonsense," Martha said firmly. "It is just sitting in my trunk gathering dust. Better it should be worn and enjoyed. Besides, Benjamin Ashford is a good man, and you both deserve some happiness." Clara hugged her, overwhelmed by the kindness of this woman who was becoming a friend. The night of the dance, Clara dressed carefully, arranging her hair in a simple style that framed her face. When she emerged from her room, Benjamin was waiting in the main room, cleaned up and wearing his best clothes. His eyes widened when he saw her. "Clara, you look beautiful," he said, his voice full of wonder. "Thank you," Clara said, feeling herself blush. "You look very handsome." The drive into town was filled with comfortable conversation and shared laughter. The dance was being held in the largest barn in Truckee, decorated with autumn leaves and lanterns. Music spilled out into the night, fiddles and guitars creating a lively melody. Benjamin helped Clara down from the wagon, his hand warm and steady on hers. As they entered the barn, heads turned, and Clara felt a flutter of anxiety. But Benjamin kept his hand on the small of her back, a gesture of support and solidarity, and she drew strength from his presence. Martha Cooper waved them over to where she stood, with her husband and several other couples. Introductions were made, and Clara was relieved to find herself welcomed warmly. It seemed that her story had spread through the town, and many people sympathized with her situation. Mr. Walsh was also at the dance, holding court near the refreshment table with his associates. He watched Clara and Benjamin with cold, calculating eyes, but he made no move to approach them. "Ignore him," Benjamin murmured in Clara's ear. "He only has as much power as you give him." The dancing began, and Benjamin led Clara onto the floor. She was rusty, having not danced in years, but Benjamin was patient and skilled, guiding her through the steps with ease. As they spun around the floor, Clara felt something inside her lighten and lift. She was dancing. She was laughing. She was, for this moment at least, happy. Between dances, they mingled with the other guests. Clara met more of the townspeople, slowly building connections and friendships. She was no longer the desperate mail-order bride who had arrived in September. She was becoming Clara Owens, housekeeper at the Ashford Ranch, friend to Martha Cooper and the other women, and, if she dared to hope, something more to Benjamin Ashford. Late in the evening, a slow waltz began. Benjamin pulled Clara close, and she rested her head against his shoulder, breathing in his familiar scent. They swayed together, and Clara felt herself surrendering to the moment, to the feeling of being held by someone who cared for her. "Thank you for tonight," she whispered. "I have not felt this happy in years." "You deserve to be happy every day," Benjamin said, "and if you will let me, I would like to spend the rest of my life making sure you are." Clara pulled back to look at him, her heart pounding. "Benjamin, I know it is too soon to talk about forever," he said quickly. "I am not asking for promises. I am just telling you what I hope for, what I dream about. A life with you, Clara, building something real together." "I dream about that too," Clara admitted, "but I am scared. What if I'm too broken? What if I cannot be what you need?" "You are exactly what I need," Benjamin said firmly. "You do not have to be anything other than who you are. That is more than enough." The dance ended, and people began to drift home. Benjamin and Clara walked out into the cool October night, and he helped her into the wagon. As they drove back to the ranch, Clara leaned against Benjamin's shoulder, feeling a contentment she had never thought possible. But their peace was not to last. 2 days after the dance, Clara was alone at the house, while Benjamin and Tom worked in the far pasture. She heard horses approach and looked out to see Mr. Walsh and 3 of his men riding up. Clara's heart hammered with fear, but she forced herself to remain calm. She stepped out onto the porch, keeping the door behind her open in case she needed to retreat quickly. "Miss Owens," Walsh said, dismounting, "we need to talk." "Mr. Ashford is not here," Clara said, keeping her voice steady. "You should come back when he returns." "It is you I want to speak with, not Ashford," Walsh said, approaching the porch. I have a proposition for you. I am not interested in anything you have to say, Clara replied. Hear me out, Walsh said. I am willing to forgive your humiliation of me and your debt if you agree to certain terms. You will leave Ashford's employ immediately and work in my saloon as a cook. You will live in the rooms above the saloon, and I will pay you a small wage. It is a generous offer, considering how you have wronged me. I will not work for you, Clara said firmly. Please leave. Walsh's expression hardened. You do not seem to understand your position. I can make life very difficult for you and for Ashford. I have friends in this town, connections that reach all the way to Sacramento. I can destroy his business, drive away his customers, make sure he loses everything. Then you will be the one who destroys his business, not me, Clara said. I will not be blackmailed into working for you. You ungrateful whore, Walsh snarled, mounting the steps. I should have known better than to try to reason with you. He reached for Clara, but she had been expecting it. She darted back through the door and tried to slam it shut, but Walsh caught it and forced his way inside. Clara grabbed the cast-iron skillet from the stove and swung it at Walsh's head. He ducked, cursing, and she ran for the back door. But one of Walsh's men had circled around. He grabbed Clara, pinning her arms. She screamed and struggled, terror overwhelming her as she was dragged back into the house. Let her go! The shout came from outside. Benjamin burst through the front door, and the scene seemed to freeze. He took in Clara held by Walsh's man, Walsh standing near the fireplace, and the other two men blocking the back door. Let her go, Benjamin repeated, his voice dangerously calm. Right now? Or what, Ashford? Walsh sneered. You are outnumbered. I do not care, Benjamin said. Let her go. Walsh nodded to his man, who released Clara. She stumbled toward Benjamin, who caught her and gently pushed her behind him. Get out of my house, Benjamin said to Walsh. Now, before I do something we will both regret. This is not over, Walsh said. You are making a very powerful enemy. You were already my enemy, Benjamin replied. Now get out. Walsh and his men left, but the threat hung in the air like smoke. After they were gone, Clara collapsed into a chair, shaking violently. Benjamin knelt in front of her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. Are you hurt? Did they harm you? No, Clara managed. You arrived in time. How did you know to come back? Tom saw them riding toward the house. We came as fast as we could. Benjamin's jaw was tight with suppressed rage. I should have known Walsh would not let this go. I should have stayed with you. This is not your fault, Clara said. Benjamin, he threatened to destroy your business if I did not leave. Maybe I should go. I should not have put you in this position. Stop, Benjamin said firmly. You are not leaving. Walsh is a bully and a coward, and I will not let him dictate our lives. We will figure this out together. Over the next weeks, Walsh made good on his threats. Customers who had planned to buy horses from Benjamin suddenly canceled their orders. Supplies became harder to purchase in town, with merchants nervously refusing to extend credit. Rumors spread that the Ashford Ranch was facing financial troubles, making potential buyers even more reluctant. Benjamin bore it all with grim determination, but Clara could see the strain in the lines around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. She knew he was suffering because of her, and the guilt ate at her. One evening in early November, after a particularly difficult day in which another buyer had backed out of a major purchase, Clara found Benjamin in the barn, grooming one of the horses with mechanical efficiency. Benjamin, we need to talk, she said. He looked up, and she saw the exhaustion in his face. What is it? This has to stop. Walsh is destroying you because of me. If I leave, he will stop. Your business will recover. No, Benjamin said flatly. You are being stubborn, Clara said. You will lose everything you have worked for. And you will lose everything you have worked so hard to rebuild, Benjamin countered. Your safety, your dignity, your freedom. I will not let that happen. Why? Clara demanded, frustration and fear making her voice sharp. Why are you willing to sacrifice so much for me? Benjamin set down the brush and crossed to her, cupping her face in his calloused hands. Because I love you, he said simply. Because you are the best thing that has ever happened to me. Because when you are in my house, cooking my meals, reading on the porch, humming while you work, I feel like my life finally makes sense. Because I would rather lose everything and have you than keep everything and lose you. Clara felt tears spill down her cheeks. I love you too, she whispered. so much. That is why I cannot let you sacrifice everything for me." "Then do not think of it as sacrifice," Benjamin said. "Think of it as choosing what matters most. And you matter most, Clara. You always will." He kissed her then, gentle and sweet, and Clara felt herself melting into his embrace. It was different from any kiss she had experienced before, full of tenderness and promise rather than demand and possession. When they finally pulled apart, Clara rested her forehead against Benjamin's. "What are we going to do?" she asked. "We are going to fight," Benjamin said. "Together." The next day, Benjamin rode into town and filed a complaint with the sheriff about Walsh's harassment and threats. The sheriff, a fair-minded man named Daniel Garrett, listened carefully and promised to investigate. 2 days later, Sheriff Garrett visited the ranch with news. "I spoke with Walsh and several witnesses. While I cannot prove he has been deliberately interfering with your business, I made it clear that any further harassment of you or Miss Owens will result in arrest. I also let it be known around town that I am watching the situation closely. Some of the merchants who had been refusing you service have reconsidered. It was not a complete solution, but it was a start. Slowly, tentatively, business began to trickle back. Some buyers returned, attracted by the quality of Benjamin's horses despite Walsh's interference. The other ranchers in the area, many of whom disliked Walsh, made a point of recommending Benjamin to their contacts. By mid-November, the situation had stabilized. Benjamin had not recovered all his lost business, but the ranch was no longer in immediate danger. Clara continued as his housekeeper, though everyone in town knew by now that she and Benjamin were courting. On a cold evening in late November, Benjamin asked Clara to walk with him. They bundled up against the chill and walked down to the creek that ran through the property. The water was low, gurgling over smooth stones, and the stars overhead were brilliant in the clear mountain air. "Clara," Benjamin said, taking both her hands in his, "I know we have not been courting long by traditional standards, but I feel like I have known you forever. These last 3 months, watching you heal and grow, getting to know you, falling deeper in love with you every day, have been the best of my life." He dropped to one knee, and Clara felt her heart stop. "I do not have a fancy ring yet, but I will get you one. For now, I just have my word and my heart. Clara Owens, will you marry me? Not because you need security or because you have nowhere else to go, but because you want to build a life with me. Because you love me as much as I love you." Clara was crying, but this time they were tears of joy. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Benjamin, I will marry you." He stood and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around in a circle while she laughed and cried at the same time. When he set her down, he kissed her deeply, and Clara felt like she was coming home. They were married in early December, in the same church where Clara had almost married Mr. Walsh. But this time, the church was full of friends. Martha Cooper and her husband, Tom, who stood as Benjamin's best man, Sheriff Garrett, Reverend Miller, beaming with satisfaction, and dozens of townspeople who had come to support the couple who had stood up to a bully. Clara wore the blue calico dress again, and Benjamin wore his Sunday best with a wildflower boutonniere that Clara had made that morning. As they exchanged vows, Clara felt the last of her old wounds closing. She was not broken. She was whole, healed by time and kindness and love. The reception was held at the ranch, with food and music and dancing that lasted into the night. Mr. Walsh did not attend, of course, and his absence was a relief. Clara danced with her new husband until her feet ached, laughing more than she had in her entire life. That night, as they lay in bed together in Benjamin's room, that was now their room, Clara traced the lines of her husband's face in the moonlight. "Are you happy?" Benjamin asked softly. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Clara said honestly. "You have given me everything I thought I had lost forever: hope, joy, love, a future." "You gave me those things too," Benjamin said. "Before you arrived, I was just going through the motions, working the ranch, existing, but not really living. You changed everything, Clara. You made my house a home." They held each other close, two survivors who had found each other against all odds. Life settled into a new rhythm. Clara was no longer the housekeeper, but the mistress of the ranch, a role she embraced with enthusiasm. She expanded the garden, started keeping chickens, and began improving the house with small touches that made it truly theirs. Benjamin's business continued to recover, and then to thrive as word spread about the quality of his horses, and the integrity of his character. Mr. Walsh continued to run his saloon, but his influence in town waned as more people spoke up about his bullying tactics. When he tried to run for town council the following spring, he was soundly defeated. In the summer of 1877, Clara discovered she was pregnant. Benjamin was overjoyed, though he worried constantly about her health. Tom teased him mercilessly about his hovering, but Clara found his concern endearing. Their son was born in March 1878, during a late spring snowstorm. They named him Thomas, after Tom, who had been like a grandfather to them both. The old ranch hand cried when they told him, and he doted on the baby with shameless affection. As Clara held her newborn son and looked at her husband, she marveled at how much her life had changed. 2 years ago, she had arrived in Truckee as a desperate woman with no hope and no future, prepared to sell herself into what would have been another miserable marriage. Now she was surrounded by love, security, and possibility. "What are you thinking?" Benjamin asked, sitting on the edge of the bed and stroking his son's downy head. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Clara said. "How lucky we both are." "Luck had nothing to do with it," Benjamin said with a smile. "You were brave enough to choose yourself, and I was smart enough to see what a treasure you are." "You reminded me what kindness felt like," Clara said softly. "Every day, until I could believe I deserved it." "You have always deserved it," Benjamin said. "I am just glad I got to be the one to show you." They sat together in the quiet of their bedroom, their son sleeping peacefully between them, and Clara felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. She had survived so much, lost so much, and now she had found everything that mattered. Over the years that followed, the ranch prospered. Benjamin's reputation as a horseman grew, and buyers came from all over California to purchase his animals. Clara managed the household and raised their children. Thomas was followed by a daughter named Grace in 1880, and another son named James in 1882. The house was full of laughter and love, the exact opposite of the silent, fearful home Clara had known in her first marriage. Tom lived to see all 3 children born, and he passed peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1883. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, and Benjamin carved a headstone that read, "Thomas Morrison, friend and family." Clara planted wildflowers on his grave every spring. Martha Cooper remained Clara's closest friend, and their families spent holidays together. Sheriff Garrett became a regular visitor, appreciating Benjamin's level-headedness and Clara's excellent coffee. The ranch became known as a place of hospitality and warmth, where travelers were always welcome and no one was turned away hungry. Mr. Walsh's fortunes declined over the years. His saloon burned down in 1879 under suspicious circumstances, and he left Truckee shortly after, moving to San Francisco, where he disappeared into obscurity. Clara felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only relief that his shadow no longer hung over their lives. On their 10th wedding anniversary in December 1886, Benjamin presented Clara with a beautiful locket containing pictures of their 3 children. 10 years, he said, fastening it around her neck, and I love you more now than I did on our wedding day. I never thought I could be this happy, Clara admitted. There were so many times in my life when I thought I would never know what it felt like to be truly loved, to be safe, to be cherished. And now? Benjamin asked. Now I know, Clara said, kissing him, because you show me every single day. They stood on the porch of their home, looking out over the ranch they had built together. Snow was falling softly, coating the mountains in white, and smoke rose from the chimney. Inside, their children were decorating a Christmas tree with Tom's help, their laughter drifting out into the evening. Clara thought about the terrified woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in Truckee 10 years ago, prepared to marry a cruel stranger because she had no other choice. That woman had been so beaten down by life that she had forgotten what kindness felt like, had stopped believing she deserved anything better than what she had known. But Benjamin had reminded her, every day, through small gestures and grand ones, through words and actions, through patience and understanding and unwavering love, he had shown her what it meant to be valued, to be respected, to be cherished. And in learning to accept his love, Clara had learned to love herself again. She had healed, she had grown, she had become the woman she was always meant to be. What are you thinking? Benjamin asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. I am thinking that I am grateful, Clara said, leaning back against him, for everything, for you, for our family. for this life we have built together." "I am grateful too," Benjamin said, kissing the top of her head. "Every single day." They stood together in the falling snow, two souls who had found each other when they both needed it most, and Clara knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. As the years continued to pass, the Ashford Ranch became legendary in the Sierra Nevada. Benjamin's horses were sought after from Sacramento to Nevada, known for their strength, intelligence, and gentle temperament. Clara became known in her own right as a woman of wisdom and compassion, someone that other women sought out for advice and comfort. She never forgot what it felt like to be trapped and helpless, and she made it her mission to help other women who found themselves in similar circumstances. Their children grew strong and healthy, raised with love and respect. Thomas inherited his father's way with horses and his mother's compassionate heart. Grace had her mother's determination and her father's steady calm. James was the wild one, full of energy and mischief, but kind to his core. In 1890, when Clara was 38 and Benjamin was 44, they stood together on the porch of their home and watched the sun set over the mountains they had called home for nearly 15 years. Their children were inside preparing supper. The ranch was thriving, and they had everything they had ever dreamed of. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Clara asked. "If you had not come to that church? If I had gone through with marrying Walsh?" "I try not to," Benjamin admitted. "It is too terrible to imagine. But I do think about how grateful I am that you had the courage to say no. That single word changed both our lives." "You gave me the courage to say it," Clara said. "Just by being there, by showing me that someone cared." "We saved each other," Benjamin said. "That is what I believe. I was as lost as you were, just in a different way. And we found each other exactly when we needed to." Clara turned in his arms to face him. His hair was graying at the temples now, and there were lines around his eyes, but to her, he was as handsome as the day they met. More than that, he was home. He was safety. He was love. "I love you," she said, "more than I have words to express." "I love you too," Benjamin said, "today, tomorrow, and forever." They kissed as the sun sank below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Inside their home, their children laughed. In the barn, the horses they had raised together nickered softly. Around them, the land they had tended together flourished. Clara had traveled 2,000 miles to escape a life of fear and pain, and she had found everything she had been searching for in a quiet cowboy who believed that kindness mattered more than power, that love was stronger than cruelty, and that every person deserved to be treated with respect and dignity. Benjamin had been working his ranch alone, going through the motions of life without really living, and he had found purpose and joy in helping a desperate woman remember what she was worth. Together, they had built a life full of love, laughter, and meaning. They had created a family and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. They had proven that kindness was not weakness, that compassion was not foolishness, and that love could heal even the deepest wounds. As they walked inside to join their children for supper, Clara felt a peace so profound it brought tears to her eyes. She had forgotten what kindness felt like, but Benjamin had reminded her every day until she not only remembered, but believed she deserved it. And in the end, that made all the difference. She had learned to accept love, to give love, and to build a life rooted in love. She had learned that her past did not define her future, that her scars told a story of survival rather than defeat, and that happiness was not something forever out of reach, but something she could claim for herself. The mail-order bride who arrived in Truckee in September 1876 had been broken and afraid, but the woman who sat down to dinner with her family in 1890 was whole, confident, and joyful. She had been transformed not by magic or miracle, but by the steady daily practice of kindness shown by a good man who loved her. And every day for the rest of their lives together, Benjamin continued to show Clara what kindness felt like, and Clara continued to bloom under the warmth of his love. They grew old together, watched their children marry and have children of their own, and built a legacy that extended far beyond their ranch. When Clara finally passed away in 1912 at the age of 60, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, her last words were about Benjamin, who had died peacefully in his sleep 2 years earlier. "He saved me," she whispered, "and I saved him. We had a good life together, such a good life." And it was true. From the moment a terrified woman stepped off a stagecoach in a rough mountain town to the day she took her last breath, surrounded by the families she had built, Clara's life had been transformed by love. She had learned that kindness was not something to be forgotten, but something to be practiced, cherished, and passed on to the next generation. The ranch continued for generations, run by their descendants, and the story of Benjamin and Clara became family legend. They were remembered not as perfect people, but as two souls who had found each other in darkness and created light together. They were remembered for their kindness, their courage, and their unwavering commitment to treating every person with dignity and respect. And in the mountains of California, where the pines still whisper and the creeks still run clear, their love story endures as a testament to the transformative power of simple, daily kindness. The mail-order bride who had forgotten what kindness felt like had been reminded by a cowboy who showed her every single day, and together they built a love that changed not only their lives, but the lives of everyone they touched. It was a love born from adversity, strengthened by mutual respect, and sustained by unwavering commitment. It was a love that proved healing was possible, that second chances were real, and that kindness, practiced faithfully every single day, could transform even the most wounded heart into something beautiful and whole. And so, their story ended not with tragedy or regret, but with joy, fulfillment, and the deep satisfaction of a life well lived and a love well earned. They had faced their demons and won. They had chosen each other every single day, and they had built something that lasted far beyond their own lifetimes, a legacy of love and kindness that would echo through the generations yet to come.